music, Power Man, The Kinks. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. A Senate Democrat committee heard testimony Monday alleging fraud and waste by the Pentagon's largest contractor in Iraq, Kellogg Brown and Root, or KBR. KBR denied all the allegations. It used to be a subsidiary of Halliburton, the company formerly headed by Vice President Dick Cheney. Committee Chair Senator Byron Dorgan from North Dakota has scheduled more hearings on wasted government money and said that, quote, in cost-plus contracts, waste doesn't matter to contractors. He added that in recent years he had seen, quote, the greatest waste, fraud, and abuse this country has ever witnessed. KBR has a $27 billion logistics contract with the U.S. Army as the sole provider of services to troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other parts of the world. Earlier this month, the U.S. Army awarded KBR an additional $150 million 10-year contract. Meanwhile, another lesser-known defense contractor, L3, held its annual shareholder meeting in New York yesterday. L3 specializes in intelligence gathering in Iraq and is the second largest employer in Iraq after KBR. Created in part by Wall Street investment bankers working for Lehman Brothers, L3 is now the parent company to firms like Titan, which provided translators at Abu Ghraib. The watchdog group CorpWatch released a scathing report yesterday about L3 and Titan. It's called Outsourcing Intelligence in Iraq. Pratap Chatterjee is the managing editor of CorpWatch and the author of this report. He just returned from Iraq, where he was embedded with the U.S. military and investigating the outsourcing of both military logistics and intelligence gathering. He joins us now here in the Firehouse Studio in New York. We're also joined by Marwan Mawiri. He worked as a translator with Titan in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. Welcome, both of you, to Democracy Now!
Juan, thank you for having us.
Let's start first with KBR and its alleged abuses. You're very familiar with that topic.
I'm very familiar with that, Juan, yes. And this is my fourth trip to Iraq, and this time I was embedded with the 316th Expeditionary Sustainment Command and Battalion up in Anaconda and down in Camp Arifjan with the 1st Theater Sustainment Command. And what I discovered was a culture of excess. And it's interesting. It's different from what I thought. Basically, the idea of the military here is to provide as much as possible to the troops so they have sort of a home-time experience. So we're talking about Southern comfort food. You have some menus here, you know, an Easter menu, an Indian night menu, you know, soldiers are provided with, you know, bacon, pork loin, jelly beans, waffle bars.
The Happy Easter menu, Cornish entrees, Cornish hen, prime rib, sliced ham, roasted turkey, and grilled trout. Side dishes, shrimp, cocktail, macaroni and cheese, candied yams, mashed potatoes. Sounds like a good menu.
Yeah, it's a pretty good menu, and the idea really is when soldiers are there is they get provided with good food, as much of it as they want. They get food 4 times a day. They have internet. They have video games they can play. The idea is to remove them from the reality of Iraq and to make them feel at home. And we were talking to a young soldier from Mississippi, and he said, reading the media, you know, I thought this was a lot more dangerous place. Now, remember, out of the 160,000 troops, about 100,000 stay on the bases. And they are really not, we talked to a soldier and we said, well, how do you communicate with the Iraqis? And he said, well, you know, the Iraqis in the base, they're pretty happy. And I'm like, but there aren't any Iraqis in the base. The people you're meeting on the base are Indian. And this food is provided, you know, to the troops by Indian workers who are paid, if they're cleaners, $9 a day, if they're cooks, $20 a day, if you're a cashier, $30 a day. And it's driven in by Fijian truck drivers. I spent some time hanging out with Fijian truck drivers in Kuwait. These guys have driven 100 trips to Iraq, from Kuwait City to Mosul to Anaconda to places around there, and they paid $180 a trip. So the very fact that there are beans and bullets in Iraq is a result of, you know, third world workers providing this stuff to troops. The troops now, when they live there, have, if you're not on the front lines, the idea is to keep you there and to make you happy, because remember, a lot of the troops are there, you know, at great cost to themselves and because they need to make a living. The problem is this creates a culture of excess. So in a sense, I met with Colonel Moreland and Colonel Carroll at the 1st Sustainment Command down in Kuwait. And I said, look, I have evidence of contractors who've been involved in multi-billion-dollar fraud. I have evidence that the truck drivers and the workers are not being paid well. Will you do something about this? And they said, no, the contract works. The troops are fed. So here's the problem is you can't even give KBR a slap on the wrist because they know they can get away with things. In 2004, there was a trucking contract with a company called PwC from Kuwait. They're driving things into Iraq, and they have hired drivers who are not competent, who can't drive these trucks. And the military says, we're not going to change anything. We know this was true. Colonel Moreland himself said, there was a problem the first year. I said, well, why don't you do something about it? He says, because, you know, we're at war. I mean, this is the reality. And this is why KBR knows it can get away, both workers, particularly management, with charging a lot. It really is with a culture of excess.
But now there have been, I don't know how many investigations of contractor abuse in Iraq, congressional hearings, GAO reports. Nothing seems to change. Well,
I mean, you mentioned it yourself, Juan. This is a company that's probably gotten $25 billion worth of contracts. Its new contract is $150 billion over the next 10 years. This is a lot of money. And the reality is there are companies you can do. KBR, for example, in doing this work is subcontracting it to a lot of other companies, to Kulak from Turkey, to Tamimi from Saudi Arabia, to Prime Projects International from Dubai. Now, I'm not suggesting that these companies are much better, because given half a chance, they would overcharge too. And they definitely exploit their workers, the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Egyptians, the Sri Lankans. Now, the Marines actually did an interesting experiment in Djibouti at Camp Lemonnier, where they decided to get rid of KBR and hire instead the company they were subcontracting to, and they saved a bunch of money. The Army Corps of Engineers, in reconstructing Iraq, has decided that companies like Parsons, companies like Bechtel,